Today we'll discuss three important amendments to the Indian Constitution, the 24th, 25th, and 26th Amendments. So let's begin by outlining what all we are going to cover. First of all, we'll discuss the historical context, the circumstances that necessitated these amendments. Secondly, we discuss the purpose, the objectives behind these constitutional changes, and also what key changes they brought in and how these changes impacted Indian governance, and also the future course, how these amendments evolved over time. So the first amendment we have is the 24th Amendment of 1971. And the historical context for this amendment was, there was this famous Supreme Court case known as Golaknath case of 1967. In this case, Supreme Court has given a verdict that the power of the Parliament to amend fundamental rights is not absolute. So this verdict of Supreme Court has put severe restrictions on the power of the Parliament to amend fundamental rights. So this verdict by Supreme Court has also hindered the various reforms carried out by the government, like land redistribution, and this has also created a friction between the judiciary and Parliament, and now the government felt a need to amend the constitution. So basically the purpose of this amendment was to restore the power of the Parliament to amend any part of the constitution including fundamental rights, so that it can facilitate the government's effort of socio-economic reforms which are vital for national development. So what were the key changes made through 24th Amendment? The Parliament has amended Article 368, and now this article clearly mentioned that the Parliament has the absolute power to amend any part of the Indian Constitution. And also Article 13, which is by the way a fundamental right, and states that any law which is inconsistent with the fundamental rights, or if they are violating fundamental rights, they can be declared null and void. So this amendment has also amended this particular article and stated that the amendments are not laws. If amendments are not laws, the judiciary has no power to review amendments because it has the power to review laws. And if amendments are not laws, it cannot be reviewed by judiciary. So this amendment has also curtailed the power of judicial review of the courts. What was the impact of this amendment? This amendment has strengthened the legislative authority of the Parliament, and now the Parliament can pursue its journey of reforms which are aligned with directive principles of state policy. This amendment has balanced the needs of socio-economic progress with individual rights. So what was the future course of this amendment? This particular amendment was upheld by the Supreme Court in Kesavanand Bharati case of 1973. But the Supreme Court has also introduced the basic structure doctrine and said that the Parliament cannot violate this doctrine, which means that the Parliament has the power to amend the Constitution, but it has no power to alter the fundamental features of the Constitution. The second amendment is the 25th Amendment of 1971. So the historical context for this amendment was, the government at that time was trying to implement various radical land reforms, but those land reforms were in conflict with right to property, which was then a fundamental right. So this right to property has become a significant obstacle in the way of bringing out land reforms. Because the moment the land reforms breaches the right to property, the judiciary would declare such laws as unconstitutional. So the purpose of this amendment was to reduce judicial interference in land reforms and to prioritize the welfare of the people over property rights, and to materialize the Articles 39B and C of Directive Principles of State Policy. So let's first discuss what were the Articles 39B and C talking about. Article 39B talks about the distribution of resources, which means the state shall ensure that ownership and control of material resources like land, water, and wealth are distributed to serve common good. And also Article 39C says that avoiding economic concentration, The state shall ensure that wealth and means of production do not concentrate in the hands of a few, leading to economic inequality. So this is basically a directive to the state to ensure distribution of resources and also to avoid the economic concentration in the hands of a few. But the dilemma for the government has become to balance this directive with the right to property, which was a fundamental right back then. So what were the key changes brought in by this amendment? So this amendment has amended Article 31 and substituted the word compensation with the word amount. Now whenever the government acquire some land, they will pay the amount and not the compensation. Compensation is paid for something which we have lost, and amount we pay something we have purchased. So now it has given the power to the government to determine the price of the land which they are acquiring. And now the Article 31C, 31 was a right to property, and under this they had added a clause C which shielded those laws which are being implemented by the government to give effect to Article 39B and C, which we talked about. Now these laws which are implementing Article 39B and C cannot be challenged for violating fundamental rights under Article 14, 19 and 31. So the impact of this amendment was that it facilitated equitable land redistribution and resource management, and it has also reduced judicial intervention in economic reforms. So what was the future course of this amendment? So Supreme Court has upheld this amendment, that this amendment is fine as long as this does not violate the principles laid down in Kesavanand Bharati case. And in Kesavanand Bharati case, the court has said that the laws should not violate the basic structure of the constitution. The third and the last amendment of the day is the 26th Amendment of 1971. And to understand this amendment better, we first need to understand the concept of privy purses. So we all know this fact that Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, after India got independence, he managed to integrate 562 princely states into Indian Union. But how did he manage to do that? He managed to do that with the help of the concept of privy purses. When the rulers of princely states, they decided to merge their territories with Indian Union, they are now compromising on the sovereignty, the privileges and rights which they would have enjoyed in their territory if they have not decided to merge with India. But now if they are merging with India, they had to give up their sovereignty, their privileges and their rights which they can exercise in their territories. So in order to compensate for the losses of the princely states rulers, the government of India said that we would compensate you, we would provide you some monetary compensation for your losses. So privy purses were the payments made by Government of India to former rulers of princely states as a part of agreement after India gained independence in 1947. So what was the historical context of this amendment? So the historical context for this amendment was the prevalence of the concept of privy purses. Though we have decided that we would grant the rulers of princely states some monetary compensation for their losses, but now after independence it has become financially unviable to carry on this practice. So now the government has decided to do something about this, and for this purpose they brought in this amendment. So the purpose of this amendment was to abolish the privy purses, privileges and titles granted to the rulers of former princely states and reinforce India's democratic and secular character. What were the key changes made through this amendment? So this amendment has amended Article 291, under which the provisions for privy purses were removed. Also under Article 362, it abolished guarantees for privileges of erstwhile rulers, and Article 363A, under this they have derecognized princely rulers and formally ending their constitutional status. What was the impact of this amendment? This amendment has ensured equality in true sense. Now the government has significant public funds available for welfare and development initiatives. And this amendment has also transitioned India from a monarchy-influenced structure to a fully democratic one. What was the future course of this amendment? So this amendment was upheld by the Supreme Court of India as being consistent with India's democratic values. So let's summarize everything which we have discussed today. 24th Amendment empowered Parliament to amend any part of the Constitution, restoring legislative supremacy. 25th Amendment prioritized public welfare over property rights, enabling effective land reforms. 26th Amendment abolished feudal privileges, reinforcing democracy and equality. This is it for today.